Hi, everyone. This is Mini Suri. I'm a Thai board member, Thai Silicon Valley board member, and also a CEO co-founder of a company called Mini. So let me give you a little intro of what Thai is. Thai is a 27-year-old organization dedicated to fostering entrepreneurship. It was established by a group of very successful entrepreneurs to help really bring the generation of corporate executives, senior professionals, and budding entrepreneurs to the next level. Thai has now grown over 61 chapters in 14 countries, and it continues to grow. The mission of Thai is very deeply ingrained in fostering entrepreneurship through mentoring, networking, education, funding, and also connecting to the VCs. The main focus of Thai is actually to give back to the community. And I would say I'm a very interesting case where Thai has really helped me to the entrepreneur that I am. And if this wouldn't have been Thai's mentoring from great minds, I didn't think so my journey would be that easy. Now, let me introduce you to this person who has been continuously working in the security compliance space, Naveen Bisht, founder and CEO of Akitra. Naveen is a serial entrepreneur. I think he never sleeps, and has led numerous companies in security and network infrastructure industries. He was the founder and co-founder and CEO of Strax, Secure Act, Nina Networks, and Ukea Software, which was acquired by Novell. Naveen is a past chair, programs, and a board member of Thai Silicon Valley. Again, very committed to Thai's charter, Thai's message. Naveen has, though he doesn't put doctor before him, but he has pursued PhD studies at University of California, Santa Barbara. He holds an MS from Texas Tech and BS MS degree from Birla Institute of Technology and Sciences in India. Naveen holds 10 patents in the area of artificial intelligence, security, and networking, and has published several papers and articles on entrepreneurship and industry trends. While Naveen is not sleeping, which I don't know if he does, he's also running such great events like the one which you are seeing. So Naveen, all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minnie. Thank you so much for kind words. Good evening and good morning to some of the folks if you're joining from other parts of the world where it's morning. And we really appreciate and we're really excited to have you here for this amazing story of an amazing entrepreneur today. And so just housekeeping items. So we'll have, after I introduce our speaker today, so please make sure to think about all the questions you want to ask him. We'll have a Q&A session after he goes through his journey. So as you all know, cloud, mobile, and AI applications demand high performance, security, and energy efficiency at massive scale. Semiconductors are obviously essential for making this happen, but semiconductor-based startups targeting infrastructure face a lot of challenges, and they need a lot of capital and also have little room for any error. So how can you create leading and innovative companies in this space? This is what our amazing speaker today, Rajiv Khemani, and his co-founders did by founding Innovium in 2014, when the cloud infrastructure market was just beginning to explode. They had a vision to start from the scratch and meet the needs of these data centers with innovations like higher scale, lowest latency, programmability, and analytics. And Innovium became a significant supplier to leading cloud customers in building out their architectures. The company was acquired by Marvell for over $1.2 billion in 2021, allowing Marvell to participate in this fastest growing segment of the switch market with a cloud and AI optimized solution. Now, After taking a little break, I guess, Rajiv is again at his latest innovative startup as co-founder and CEO of Auradine, a pioneer in web infrastructure solutions, including blockchain, security, and privacy. Auradine has raised 81 million Series A round to drive scalability, security, and sustainability for blockchain, privacy, and security applications. Before Innovium, Rajiv was CEO, Chief Operating Officer at Cavium, a leading provider of infra semiconductors for networking, mobile, and security applications. He helped grow Cavium from an early stage startup to a public multi-billion dollar valuation company with over 500 million in annual design wins. Earlier, he worked as a general manager at Intel's network processor business unit and also at NetApp as well as Sun Microsystems. I know a lot of my friends started their career at Sun. And Rajiv is also, on top of that, an investor, as well as he was also co-founder of a VC fund as well. So, he brings extensive experience, not only as an entrepreneur, but from the other side as well. And he holds a BS in computer science from IIT Delhi, MS in computer science from New York University, and MBA from Stanford. Outside of his work, he loves to hike, play poker, read books, watch sports along with family and friends. With that, I would like to invite and hand it over to Rajiv to share his exciting, colorful, and amazing entrepreneurial and professional journey with us this evening. So let's give him a big round of virtual applause. With that, to you, Rajiv. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Naveen, for those kind words and a detailed introduction. It is a pleasure to be here at TI Silicon Valley to share with you and several of the folks on the call my story. And obviously, my goal is to look at my story, but try to figure out what are the lessons and what are the things that others can benefit from. So the way I'm going to do this is I will go through a set of slides that put some structure around my story. And then we'll open it up for Q&A, as you said, Naveen. All right, so I assume you can see this?
Yes.
Me?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so again, my story, and before actually I jump into my story, these days, as I was looking at doing my story, I'm one of these people that doesn't think too much about the past. I'm always trying to figure out what's coming next. So this was a great opportunity for me to walk down memory lane, just reflect upon what has happened, and also take some learnings that are very important to document and capture. But these days, we live in this world of large language models and generative AI, which can tell you all these answers without you having to do any of this work. So I figured, why don't we try that first? So I went to Bard and I said, what are top 3 pieces of advice that to provide to startup founders or early employees? And answer that question from the perspective of Rajiv Khemani, from my perspective. And believe it or not, it gave a great answer. Many of these things that it came up with in the answer are things that I have said. I've said to people in my company, to my investors, and I firmly believe in most of these. A great team is very critical. Focus on the customer is very critical. Being relentless when you're doing startups, or whether you are an early employee in a startup, is very important. Learning and adaptation is important. Having a sense of purpose and having fun. So the main point I want to make with this slide is really that entrepreneurs these days have a lot of resources. And so as you are encountering some tough problems, there are a lot of resources available that you can take full advantage of. Fortunately for me, it didn't go beyond this. Otherwise, I would be out of a job in this situation. But in a few years, we don't know, that might happen. So the rest of the story is not using generative AI. And I've tried to structure it as follows. My story really breaks into 3 different parts. The first part is growing up in India The second part is getting technical and business degrees for my education. And then the third part, which is really the longest part, is being a serial entrepreneur, like Naveen and Minnie, as well as several folks that you've seen in this event. And then what I've tried to do is, based on my experience, try to distill some lessons. And I've tried to do it in two different ways. Lessons that might be important as an entrepreneur or an employee in an early stage startup, as well as lessons that I think are broader, that are important for life, because entrepreneurship is just one part of life for all of us. I grew up in India, and my story really starts even before I was born. My father and my parents, they got married in Delhi. My father was selected for the IPS, which is a national exam in India, for those who might not know. And he was assigned to the state Gujarat. And so they relocated to Gujarat and set up a family and life and career and so forth. Several years later, I was born in Gujarat. And again, for people who don't know, Gujarat is a state in the western part of India. It was the home of Mahatma Gandhi, where he lived most of his life, as well as it's the state where our current prime minister was previously chief minister. Now, from the time I was born through to the second grade, we lived in 6 different cities. So you can imagine every year, or even sometimes less than a year, we would pick up and move to yet another city, and with new homes, new neighbors, and then, obviously new schools after I was able to go to school. After that, my father was transferred to Himachal, completely different surroundings, different language. And we stayed for a few years in a town called Shamshi, which is not too far from Kullu, a very, very popular tourist destination place. And I studied there through middle school. And then after that, my father was transferred to New Delhi. And then I attended a couple of schools and finished my high school over there. But all through this period, if you asked anyone, they would tell you that I was a very shy, nerdy kid in a middle-class family. Education was extremely important. And as you saw, we used to get transferred or relocated every so often. Okay? So from that period of time, the big influences for me were that I became comfortable with change. It was kind of natural. We were going to move to a different place, to a different school. We had limited resources as a middle-class family, which is, I think, very important for entrepreneurs to be able to do more with less. I was very nerdy. And believe it or not, I felt that was a big advantage. I was able to focus. I did extremely well in school. I would get excellent grades, top my class and so forth. And my parents, unlike helicopter parents of today, really encouraged my strengths and didn't worry about some of the things I was not good at. But they really encouraged me, and they were responsible for the big aspirations I had later on in my career. Now, having said all this stuff, I have to confess, I lacked social skills. I was very anxious in groups of people. I did not have the confidence and did not have the risk-taking ability that's needed to become an entrepreneur. Now, as I finished high school, mainly because I excelled in academics, I took the IIT entrance examination, which I'm sure a lot of folks are aware of, and I ranked in the top 100. And I was thrilled. So as a result of that, I joined the IIT program in New Delhi. I took the computer science program. And at that time, in the early days of computer science, we had a class of 24. Now, it turned out many of those folks ended up in Silicon Valley. And this picture that you see is 6 of us, which is about a fourth of our class, getting together for lunch at a local restaurant. Subsequent to that, I went to do a PhD at NYU. I left in between, got my master's, moved to Silicon Valley, and then later on went to Stanford Graduate School of Business for my MBA. Now, all of these three institutions are top universities in the world, tremendous professors, very good academic programs. But for me, the experience was all about building friendships and growing in dimensions that were other than academic. So I made a lot of friendships. At IIT, I played bridge, ping pong, and tennis. When I went to NYU, I co-led the formation of the NYU Bridge Club, and we went on to win the NYU Collegiate, New York City Collegiate Championship. And then when I was at Stanford, I was really impressed by the peer group that we had, and also led the co-led the study group to India and Pakistan with 25 students, a couple of professors, visited the parliament when you could actually go inside the Indian parliament and such. So from that time, from those college years, the thing that stood out for me was that I really looked at peers and alums as role models. These guys were tremendously successful and they were a source of inspiration. Also, there was the opportunity to meet with some incredible professors and industry leaders. So as an example, while I was at Stanford Business School, I was part of the alumni committee, and I organized a dinner at the home of Scott McNealy, who was the founder and CEO of Sun Microsystems. We got to his home and he gave us kind of some lessons. We asked him questions. It was an incredible experience. I also took a class from Andy Grove, who is really an iconic CEO responsible for not just Intel's success, but the success of the semiconductor industry. And he taught us a class. I used to sit next to him, went out for lunch with him a couple of times, just an unbelievable opportunity. And then Steve Jurvetson, who's a successful venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, he was a classmate of mine, and he had organized dinner at the home of Steve Jobs. Steve had been ousted from Apple at the time, and he was at Next. We went to his house. He sat on the sofa. We all sat on the carpet on the floor, and he spoke about, his mindset at the time, which was he was very unhappy at being chucked out of Apple, and how he thought about the industry and about companies and so forth. But I do think that he recognized that moving out of Apple was a experience of growth, and I think improved him substantially in his second stint at Apple. So overall, I think the experiences were tremendous. The friendships were very impactful and have been a source of learning, joy, and support all throughout. Okay, so you see some of my good friends, and there are many more. And each of these folks that you see here has played a role in me finding a job, or helping me with a startup decision, or being part of that startup that I was with. And so my main point here is that these friendships are very important and they last a lifetime. And you never know when one of these things turns into something important. After that, I have spent roughly about 25, 30 years in Silicon Valley being a serial entrepreneur. So I started out at Sun Microsystems and NetApp after business school, paid off my business school loans. So I was very risk averse at the time. And in hindsight, I should have jumped into a startup sooner in 1995 when I graduated, because the internet was just about to explode. But again, a lot of these things clicked by themselves. So I used to be at NetApp, and at NetApp, I did NetApp's very first acquisition, which was a company called Internet Middleware Corporation. The CEO of that company left and became a founder of NetBoost, and he recruited me as an early executive in the company. NetBoost got acquired by Intel. I stayed on at Intel for several years. One of my Intel colleagues, a venture capitalist, Rohini, made the connection with Cavium. And that's how I ended up at Cavium. I was an early executive at Cavium, spent 10 years over there, and Cavium became extremely successful, was acquired by Marvell later on. After that, again, I ran into one of my good friends, Amar from Stanford Business School, and we just met for lunch, and that was the trigger that led to the formation of Moment Ventures, a early stage venture capital firm that continues to do well. During that period, I met one of my not fellow alums from IIT Delhi at a restaurant in Silicon Valley that led to the formation of Innovium. And again, a number of folks from our universities, as well as people that I had become friends with earlier through my startup journey, were involved in Innovium. Innovium, and I'll talk a little bit more about Innovium as we go forward, was eventually acquired by Marvell. I took about a year and a half off, and it turned out, ran into a former industry friend from Palo Alto Networks, Barun, who was on the founding team of Palo Alto Networks and was a customer of mine when I was at Cavium. And so as we started to discuss and talk to venture capital investors, that led to the formation of Autodyne, and this is where I am right now. So you can see that there's a thread over here of serendipity. There's a thread of connections, and has resulted in many, many different startup companies across 25 years. And I've been extremely fortunate that all of these startup companies have been successful in their own right. NetBoost was a pioneer in network processors. It was acquired by Intel, and I stayed on at Intel and became GM of the network processor BU. Cavium was very successful, had an IPO, became very quickly after IPO, achieved a multi-billion valuation, and was eventually acquired by Marvell for $6 billion. Moment, as I said, is an early stage VC firm, and it continues to do well. It's on its third fund already. Innovium was a company focused on cloud and AI optimized switching, was acquired for over 1.2 billion. And at Autodyne, we are still in stealth with our products, but really exciting, targeting a very, very massive opportunity. And we did a very large Series A of $81 million late last year. So through all of this, if you have to look at the theme, the big theme here is my entire career has been focused on performance, security, and innovation for the internet infrastructure. And with a foundation of semiconductors, but also software at the infrastructure layer. And at Autodyne, we are also working on systems and cloud level solutions that we will deliver to market through the innovative technology that we are building. Now, if you look at all the previous slide, it seems like things have just gone extremely well always, and that's certainly not true. Many, many, many failures and bumps along the way. And I'll point out a few of them. When we started Innovium, about a week into the company's existence, we were sued by Broadcom, very aggressive lawsuit. We had not even taken our D&O insurance, the directors and officers insurance. And so it was an unsettling situation where you have this large company suing you personally, and it becomes very challenging to hire people. Customers were hesitant to talk to us, and we had to navigate that through. Later on, during the course of Innovium's existence, we had a great product, customers and revenues ramping, and we got hit with the pandemic supply chain issues, where it had the potential to really destroy the company. It was an existential crisis for us. Earlier, during the Cavium years, as well as in the NetBoost years, we went through some big crashes, and we had to navigate our startups through that journey. So these are some very simple and few examples of what happened, many, many more. And so I think a lot of people say, look, you have to be relentless. You have to power through all these bumps that happen along the way in startups. It's not easy. I can tell you it's not easy. The way I look at it is I have developed this framework that I apply, and I actually call these 3 philosophies to deal with failures and surprises when they occur. The first one is I say, look, every cloud has a silver lining. Look hard, and if not obvious, try to see if you can make one. And I'll give you an example of that. So we got sued by Broadcom. We had this massive lawsuit. And what we did is we said, where is the silver lining in this? Turns out when Broadcom had sued us, it was for hiring some of the people that had approached us. And what Broadcom had listed in the lawsuit was that, look, we had breached certain non-solicit contracts. They had made these allegations which were untrue. But they had listed the names of these people and said, this is just a phenomenal set of folks. And so I said, how do we take advantage of this? So what we did is during that year, we created a presentation and we tried to do a second round of financing while we are being sued by Broadcom. And in that presentation, I said, look, we have one of the best teams in the world, and you don't have to believe me, believe Broadcom. They have said it in the lawsuit. And so we used some of those things that they had stated in the lawsuit, and we actually quoted them in presentations that led to a successful financing. So we really turned that cloud into a positive, and we were able to raise a follow-on round of financing that actually then led Broadcom to rethink whether it made sense to continue with the lawsuit. And that really ended up allowing the company to live, if you will. The second thing I look at is there a way to turn the failure that you might encounter into a micro failure versus a macro failure? And people call this pivot, but the idea is, can you turn around and minimize the impact here, shift it to something that is not a failure, but take the learnings out of this and apply to something else. And really your failure becomes a non-issue in the execution as you execute your startup. Now, sometimes you can't do either one or number two. So you have to remind yourself that doing startups and actually doing life is an infinite game. It's not one game that determines what you do. And frankly, I would say, when you've lived all your life and you're retired and you're, looking back, nobody says, did I win this life or lose this life? You look at the overall picture, and there's lots of positives in everyone's life. So no single failure matters in the bigger picture. All you got to do is use that failure as a learning experience. Make sure you try not to make the same mistakes a second time, and move on in your execution. So this is an important topic because starting startups is sexy and exciting. Navigating through failures and bumps is not so fun. But if to the extent you have a framework, you can go through it relatively calmly and actually do okay as you execute through this. Now, all of the 4 tech startups that I've been involved in have been incredibly satisfying. Huge impact not just for the employees or for the investors or for the founders, but really huge impact for the internet. NetBoost was the company that pioneered processing technology in the path of network traffic. That has resulted in greater security. It has resulted in greater features, quality of service capabilities. So all of these things that we enjoy came out of this network processing concept that NetBoost and a few other companies pioneered, and Intel became the #1 provider of network processors during that period of time. Cavium, extremely successful, delivered security, networking, and mobile processors. The technology that we did was critical for the growth of HTTPS. We powered over 90% of SSL accelerators. We made it extremely fast, extremely cheap, and scalable. And without that technology, HTTPS may not have happened or not have happened at the scale at which it did, or would have pushed out in time quite substantially. Cavium was also responsible for enabling cybersecurity and faster cloud and mobile bandwidths for a significant majority of the world's internet traffic. So all of the things that we enjoy today were influenced by Cavium's execution and products. Innovium was built in a world where cloud and AI optimized switches were becoming more important. And today, in a world of generative AI, these switches have become even more important, and the bandwidths required are even more critical. And so Innovium, one of the key things we did at Innovium was to deliver very low latencies that are, again, critical for storage and AI type applications. And we were successful where many, many other companies that tried to do the same thing failed. And we were deployed at some of the world's largest cloud providers. So if you do e-commerce, if you do transactions on the internet, if you watch video, if you do software as a service applications, you're very likely using technology that we built at Innovium. And then Auradine is poised to do something similar, and we think something even bigger than any of these things before. Our goal is to drive scalability, sustainability, and security for the future of internet infrastructure, and infrastructure which is AI powered, and infrastructure which is decentralized, and infrastructure where privacy matters. And so some of these things that we are working on, we believe will have a massive impact on the future of the web infrastructure. Being a serial entrepreneur and certainly a founder, people sometimes tend to think that you made it happen, and that's totally wrong. In order to do everything that I've been involved in, and all these companies have been involved in, it has taken a team effort. Through my career, there were a lot of mentors, teams, partners, and support of family and friends. So I tried to put some photos on this slide, and really I wanted to put 3 or 4 times as many photos, and maybe even more. But just to kind of give you a context, if you start at the bottom, this is a group of my family and friends. My wife, in every startup that I joined, I had to take a significant financial step down, a big reduction in pay. And you need your family support. My wife was working, and she was always supportive in saying, hey, instead of making all that money now, why don't you go and make 1/10 that and hope that your stock is going to be worth something in a few years' time. And so you need that support of family and friends. That's very, very critical, and especially as you're going through those failures and bumps along the way. And a lot of my friends, as Naveen said, I'm into hiking and I play poker, and I have a very good set of friends that are regular with me on hikes and playing poker. And so you see that group of friends. Now, above that are folks that have become friends through various entrepreneurial experiences. So I've tried to chronologically list folks from Sun, from Intel, from NetBoost, from Cavium, from Moment Ventures, and Innovium. A lot of my investor friends who supported me through various ups and downs, as well as my team that I'm currently working with at Auradine. Really amazing group of folks without who none of this would have been possible. So let's get to the 2 lessons and then open it up for Q&A. So my experience has been in deep tech or in infrastructure startups. And I believe this is a formula for making a startup successful. If you do these things, I believe the chances are extremely high. As you know, 90+% of startups fail. But I think if you do these, I would say you have a 70, 80, 90% chance that you would make it successful. So what are those things? So the first one is focus. Focus on a few things, not too many things, in attractive areas. Learn, become extremely intimate in those areas, and really try to figure out what are the challenges and what are the opportunities in these areas. And when I say attractive areas, I mean areas which are meaningful market size or will become meaningful market size, where there is an ability to disrupt incumbents. Those are attractive areas from the point of view of startups. Build great positive relationships throughout your career. Very, very important. As I mentioned, my string of startups has been due to those relationships. Serendipity. This is something that I very strongly believe in. As I mentioned, Innovium was started when I ran into my co-founder completely by chance at a restaurant, and then we agreed to catch up And we met a few months later that ended up becoming a company. And so I would say, pay attention to those opportunities. And you don't have to jump into everything that comes your way, but you may get certain interesting opportunities that could be the big thing for you. Now, as you start a company, it is extremely important to have the best founders and the best teams, a successful track record. This was an MIT study that showed that it can make a 10x difference in the probability of success. Startups are challenging, they take long, and having a fun, collaborative culture where people look forward to go to work, they like working with each other, is extremely critical. I strongly believe that you should avoid intelligent jerks, folks who are extremely smart and talented, but get upset at other people, or they're generally disruptive. They think that they are the best, everybody else is not as good. They add a lot of value, but they are not good for a long-lasting culture. And then finally, persevere and execute. Give it your best shot. There has been this notion of fail fast, and I see a lot of resumes of folks where people jump every 1 to 2 years and they never achieve anything. If you really want to make happen, you have to deal with the environment. You have to deal with the ups and downs. You have to build relationships with people. And a combination of being optimistic and being resilient can really deliver miracles. Things that you think may not be possible happen. So don't give up too easily, because and again, in Silicon Valley, I see a lot of folks that keep jumping 1 to 2 years because the next company is giving them a 20% raise, or they got pissed off at somebody at the company. So don't do that, okay? And so if you follow this formula, I think the chances of success are extremely high, of entrepreneurial success. Finally, key life lessons. As I said, and as I think most people know, startups are tough. And especially if you want to go very long, it requires balance. So you have to stay healthy. You have to do things outside of work, recharge, and prevent burnout. So what I try to do is I hang out with friends. I do my hiking. More recently, I've been involved in meditation. I did a 10-day meditation retreat that I thought was very impactful. And you have to make sure that you are not overwhelmed and consumed by the startup. You need that time, because the best things that you do require you to recharge and recover. The second thing is self-awareness and introspection is very important. What happens is I've seen people think that they want to build the next Google, whereas in fact, the product or the market or the traction simply isn't there. And so you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of your strengths, and you have to be aware of how your strengths match your aspirations. And then, I said, you got to do 4 years, but there are some people who do this for 10 years or 12 years, and they still don't get it. They think that there's yet another opportunity, and they haven't been able to figure out why is it not working, and maybe they need to do something different. Finally, I read this book, and there's a couple of these books called Finite and Infinite Games, as well as The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. The notion is, this whole concept was created by James Cars, who's a philosopher from NYU. Very interesting concept that basically states that startups or life is really an infinite game. Don't let one game where you might lose bring you down. A lot of us want to win every single game, and when we lose, we become disheartened. Don't do that. Really don't do that. The main thing is to keep learning, keep enjoying the journey. Remember what your vision is. Everybody's vision is different. You can have a vision for your startup. You can have a vision for your life. So remember the vision and enjoy your journey as you go forward. That is way more important than anything else that I said in this session. So with that, I want to thank and wish all the people who our entrepreneurs or early stage employees all the best in their journey ahead. And with that, I'll turn it back to Naveen for any questions people might have.
Thank, thank you so much, Rajiv. I already got a lot of kudos in my WhatsApp messages for how you you're sharing your amazing entrepreneurial journey and how you come across. So wonderful to hear that. I was just curious. So you said you did 10-day Vipassana meditation before I get into the question. Was that a Vipassana meditation or you did something else?
Yes, I did the Vipassana meditation. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I also did in 2010, and I've been doing it a few times of those 10 days, and I even tell everyone else, and it's still like every day I try to in the afternoon during my hectic day, I just get out, even go sit in my car and put my windows down and just sit there for an hour or half an hour, whatever I get. So it's
Yes.
really helpful. Really
I think there are many different options available, right? I think that some people look at faith as a way to achieve that. Some people do meditation, some people do, intense exercise. They go running for an hour every day. But I think something like that is absolutely important in the journey of a startup.
No, I totally agree with you. And I don't say that you have to do Vipassana or anything. I'm saying, like you mentioned, right? I look at it, whatever tool works for you, at least in my, situation, it really helps. So with that, anyway, let's just get into the Q&A. Really amazing. I really appreciate your taking a lot of time, very thoughtfully constructed your slides and everything. Very good. So first question I'll start off with. I know we have a lot of questions here already in Q&A. So first question usually I ask is, when you if you go back and reflect, at the time, like you're growing up as a child, even though you kind of shared some, the answers, which I'm going to ask you, was there anything if you think about it and that you think might have inspired or kind of clicked, which got you to becoming an entrepreneurial?
Yeah. I have to say, when I was young and when I was in India, there are some people who know they're going to be entrepreneurs when they're 10 years old, right? I wasn't one of those. I was one of those folks. My father, before he did his IPS, had come and he had joined the MBA program at Berkeley. And then he did not finish it because he was a vegetarian and, things were not great for vegetarians. And he was feeling, alone in those days, and he went back. And so he would tell me, saying, "Hey, you ought to go and get a great degree and then go and do an MBA from one of the top schools." And so I had that kind of a thing at the back of my mind that at some point I wanted to do an MBA from one of the top schools. But I would say that the entrepreneurial angle really happened at Sun Microsystems and then at Stanford, as I got to become aware of what entrepreneurship was. Vinod was also IIT Delhi. Vinod and Scott were founders of Sun Microsystems. So Vinod was IIT Delhi, went to Stanford Business School, and he had started Sun Microsystems. And I said, "Hey, this sounds very similar to my background, and maybe I can use him as a role model, for example."
Thank you. So let's start with the first question I have from Minnie. You met Minnie earlier. So one of the questions she has is, what was the most challenging time of your journey? So whatever you want to pick and talk about.
What is the most challenging time of my journey?
Yes.
I would say that there isn't one thing that I can point to in terms of this. I would say there were many challenging times during the journey. So, each and every one of those startups at one point felt like it wouldn't make it. Okay, so I would say that there were cases where it felt like, hey, this is not going to make it. And what happens is that you've developed this ownership and a desire to win that is so strong that you start to lose sleep, you start to get headaches, you are really not that involved with your family because you're always thinking about work. So there have been instances like that, I would say. And that's one of those things that I don't think and I would say certainly in the 3 startups I was involved in, there were periods of time where that was the case. And I would say those I would refer to as the most challenging times because they're not healthy, and I think they're avoidable. And it was fortunate that through grit, we were able to get to the other side successfully in each instance.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajiv. Second question is from Nikhil. He's basically asking what exactly is serial entrepreneurship. I've heard it many times, but not clear in its meaning.
Well, serial entrepreneurship is actually, somebody told me a funny joke. I'll come to that at the end. But serial entrepreneurship is essentially that you start a company or you join an early stage company, you take it through to some set of successful milestones, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, right? And so that's really what serial entrepreneurship is all about. Technically, it is about founding multiple companies or co-founding multiple companies, but I do view early employees in any startup and leaders in any startup, frankly, as partners, and they're entrepreneurs in my book as well. And unlike the phrase serial killer, it's a positive connotation. It's something that if you can do it and you can enjoy the journey, it's a good thing. And one of the benefits, clearly it's great to have a string of successes, but one of the things that you do with every successive entrepreneurial journey is that you learn from it, you build connections, you try to figure out what to do better next time, and if you do it a few times, there's a good chance that one of those is going to be tremendously successful.
Thank you, Rajiv. So next is obviously thanks from Anurag for he's thanking you for providing a thinking tool for dealing with challenges and failures. I think he's probably referring to that patent, the lawsuit you got and the silver lining in that. I thought that was also amazing. Next is from Ashish from Atlanta. He has 2-part questions on leadership and hiring. When founders get venture funding, the investors encourage them to hire C-level specialists. After making the C-level hires, how do you put pragmatic milestones in place to objectively measure the performance of C-level hires? In essence, how do you hire slowly and fire quickly at the C-suite?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a formula here. I would say that you have to bring in leaders that complement the capabilities of the team. So you look at your founding team and you say, okay, you're good. Again, this is where self-awareness is very critical. And so you say, okay, I'm good at these following things, and I need senior folks to complement me in these areas. So you may be a technologist and you may want to hire somebody that's more business and operations focused, or vice versa. Or you may be a architecture oriented person and you want to get an engineering execution oriented person. And also it depends on the stage, how much financing you've raised, right? So if you've raised a small amount of financing, you outsource some of the administrative tasks. If you've raised a larger amount of financing, you can insource senior folks in the finance and admin function as well. So you have to figure out your specific situation. In terms of hire and fire, the ideal thing is hire and not fire. So you spend a little extra effort in making sure that you're hiring people that are top quality, that match the culture in your company, and that you do the reference checks. Ideally, if you know people from before and you worked with them, those are the best hires. But if you hire people that you've not worked with, I think references are super critical in terms of bringing those people. But having said that, I do believe that if things don't work out and you find that there are people who are a complete misfit with your culture, it's better to have that discussion and try to resolve it sooner rather than later, and not let it go on for too long. And I've made mistakes, just to be honest, in my previous companies where maybe we hired somebody wrong and let them stay for too long, or didn't do the proper reference checks in hiring. So those are very, very important things to do. And especially as you hire the first 20, 30, 40 people in a startup, that is way more important, to do, because those people then end up hiring people who also are a fit with the culture and are A+ people.
Okay. Thank you. The second question to this by the same gentleman is, how does a founder overcome imposter syndrome? Meaning, when founders start managing C-level specialists who are more experienced than them, and then the founder.
Well, I would answer it in two different ways, right? So the first thing is that as a founder, you should not try to be an imposter. I think you should be aware of where you are strong and where you're not, and where you want to listen. You may have that position of authority, but you can listen to people and make sure that you follow good advice. But having said that, and then again, in areas that you're weak at, ask for help. Your investors and board members are there to coach you and help you. You can proactively look for an executive coach if you want. So you can do things along those lines. And then the other thing you got to be honest with yourself is, do you really want to do this job that you're in long term? And maybe you decide after a couple of years, you say, look, I might want to do a different role in the company and have somebody else run the company. And I've known instances of all types where there have been founders that have grown over time. And there have been founders who've said, look, I am going to take this company up to a certain stage, and then I'm going to have somebody else who I believe is more appropriate for that role to come in and be CEO and run the company.
Thank you, Rajiv. Very good advice. So next question is, how to find good team for a startup? How can I join a good startup founders team if I don't have any good idea? Mr. Roy, Avinash.
So two-part question, right? So how do I find good co-founders, right?
Yes.
I think it has become easier. Ideally, your co-founder is somebody you've worked with in the past in one of your companies. That's an ideal co-founder. You know each other, so there's more chemistry and you know each other's strengths and weaknesses. But in the event you don't have that scenario, these days I see people post on LinkedIn. I have a great idea. I'm looking for co-founder with the following skill set, willing to share the equity and make it attractive, and then you can do that. Now, what I've also seen is that there are some good venture capitalists where you can go and become an entrepreneur in residence, and they'll help you find co-founders. So that's another option to look at. And so there are various ways to find co-founders for your company. And by the way, having a good set of co-founders also increases the chances that you will get funded, because VCs are looking for good quality teams to invest in, right? So that was the first question. And the second one was, how do I join a good startup? I think joining a good startup actually goes back to some of the things I said earlier, which is, companies that are reasonably well funded, they're funded by good quality VCs that are in an area that you like, that you can believe that this could be an interesting area. And sometimes you go and talk to these companies and try to understand what they're trying to do. And then use your personal network to get to find these companies, and then see if you can get a good spot.
Thank you, Raji. And next, anonymous attendee has asked a question. What's the biggest setback you have experienced and overcome? I know you talked about challenges, so if you want to say anything on
What
that.
is the biggest setback
You have experienced and overcome?
Yeah, again, many setbacks. I would say that yeah, again, I can think of many, but I'll mention one, which is, we were hit with this supply chain issue at Innovium. We had lots and lots of revenue, not enough supply. And I went. So first thing is, I tried my best to solve it. Then I went to the board and tried to get them to help, and we had to go to the customer and explain to them why all those orders that they had placed upon us would not be delivered. And there was a window of time, I would say a few weeks, where I felt like many years of hard work by the team could go to naught. And so there was like several weeks where it was uncertain whether we would be able to pull it off. And during that window of time, you got to be as positive and optimistic that you can be. And when people in your company or your investors say, "Hey, what do you think?" You have to put on this confidence and optimism while you don't know what the answer is going to be. And so that's I would say that was a setback, and we did overcome it and ended up with a very good outcome for everybody.
So I think it's a very good question. I'm sure you'll have a lot of insights. And how do you scale up sales in the early days? And I know a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs make a lot of mistakes, a lot of money is burnt.
Yeah.
Having been an angel investor in many companies, I saw that.
Yeah. Well, how do you scale up sales? It depends on the kind of business you're in, right? So I would say that if you are going into a market where, let's call it 50 customers matter and drive a big portion of the TAM, you do it differently than if you're going into a market where you're going after 5,000 customers. And it's also very different when you're going into a consumer market. So the answers for all of those are very different. So if you're going into a market where few tens of customers matter, then I would say that the CEO and some of the founding team members and the C executives themselves get involved in selling. Okay, so and you are able, and you can do that for 5, 10, 15 customers yourself before you get a professional sales leader. Now, as you go towards enterprise and a larger number of end customers, you need somebody who has done it before, and that's not easy to find. You have to find some really top-notch sales leadership talent. You can't avoid going and winning a few customers to prove out your product market fit and to build that initial set of case studies that you're going to use to scale up the rest of the business. So there's no shortcut along those for that. But in terms of scaling it to thousands of customers, I really do believe that you need to find a top-notch sales leader who's done it before in the area that you're trying to focus. So for example, is it a SaaS product or a hardware product or a consumer product? It requires a different type of skill set.
No, very good. Thank you. Rajiv, it's already past 2. There are 5, 6 questions. Are you okay for 5, 10 minutes, or it's your choice?
Yes, I can stay on.
We'll try to make it up quickly. So next question is from Neeraj Rai. How do you decide what problem is worth solving? When do you know you have hit a wall and time to pivot? Basically, how do you deal with the feedback from VCs and other experts? 3 questions.
Yeah, very good, very good question. How do you know whether you've hit a wall or
when to pivot?
Or when do you pivot, right? So when you start out with something, you have a thesis in terms of, if I build something like this, it's going to have tremendous value. I would say even in the early days, even before you invest a lot of resources, you got to do some homework. You should go and talk to a lot of people to see if I did the following thing, would it be interesting? And prospective customers, You should go talk to VCs, but obviously don't use any one input because sometimes VCs don't know as well. But the best set of way to figure out is go talk to many prospective customers, 5, 10, 15, even before you start. Okay, so now if you execute on that thesis and now you're bringing this product to market, now you'll get some real feedback, whether this is clicking or not clicking. And as you're engaging with customers, you'll get even more feedback in terms of what you want to do on your product roadmap, what changes you might want to make, and how do you want to pivot along the way. Now, after doing all of this stuff, you're getting no customers and you've done your minor pivots, then you got to be honest with yourself and say, hey, I want to do something different. The big question is, how long do you take to do this? Again, depending on the investment you need to make that initial product, the answer is different. In semiconductors, when you have to put $60 million before you find out the answer, you have to be in touch with customers constantly, and you have to be in touch with the market constantly to make sure that you don't spend $100 million and then find out, holy shit, it didn't work, because that's much more painful. But if you can do it with, $500K or $1 million or $2 million and then have to pivot, that's a little bit easier to swallow. So I would say that staying close to customers, constantly testing your product market fit, incorporating feedback, and then even after that, if nothing is working, then you say, let me do something different.
Okay. So next question is from Sangeeta. I'll try to just speed up. Obviously, thank you for sharing your incredible journey and for being vulnerable and honest while narrating your story. So what are your personality traits that you think might have paid off and were key differentiators for your success?
Yeah. Key differentiators. So let's answer that. So personality traits, like I told you, right? So I was doing very well in school, college, academics. I felt like I would win at every instance. And so I had this strong desire to win every time. And I would tell you that certainly in the early days, I wouldn't take failure that well. I would get depressed and anxious and unhappy. And that's one of the things I've learned to handle better over the years. So that desire to win and do well and take things to the finish line is what I think is very, very critical from my point of view. Okay. Second thing that is very, very critical is building these relationships. And, to the extent you can be positive and build lots of good relationships, I think good things happen. So that's another key, I would say, differentiator or leadership style or whatever you want to call it, is very important part of it. Now, the third thing is that, I started out as a software engineer. I was a software engineer in college and master's, and, at Sun Microsystems, I was a software engineer. And then I shifted into semiconductors. Okay, so I got acquired into Intel, and I didn't know what a pinout was or hardware reference manual was. And I would go to these meetings where people with 20 years of semiconductor experience would be in the room with me. And I would say that ability to absorb things and learn, was very critical, to the point that in 1 or 2 years, they said, hey, we got this GM slot. We think you are the right person for it. So I think that was also an important trait. And I try to do that as much as possible and eventually build a career in semiconductors.
Yeah. Thank you, Rajiv. And next one is another very good question from Vinay Anand. You have had many successful exits. How do you maintain the passion and intensity to do yet another startup? And also, can you share some insights on the focus of your new startup and the challenges you face here that are different from your previous ones? Thank you.
Yes. So, I've done startups very successful by any measure and very satisfying. The reason I jumped into Auradine, again, like I said, it was somewhat of serendipity. I ran into Barun. I wasn't really at that time actively looking to start a company. And then as I started to help Barun and work with VCs, there were a bunch of folks that said, hey, you should come in. So that was the reason I got into the most recent one. But more important than all of that was I look at this opportunity as building a legacy company or an iconic player, industry leader in Silicon Valley. So a lot of the companies that I did don't exist today. They exist as part of other companies today, but none of those companies exist as a standalone company. So a desire to do a company and make it an iconic leader in Silicon Valley was one of the reasons that I jumped into Auradine. So and that's really what we are trying to do here, and try to apply some of the learnings. In fact, some of the lessons that I mentioned, I think are very applicable to what Auradine is doing. Okay, so that's another reason to do it. And we have just a phenomenal team that really fits that culture in terms of fun, collaborative type atmosphere that we have created here. Now, in terms of what we are trying to do is, as I said, we are thinking big. We don't know exactly where we will end up at. We started out looking at blockchain and privacy as our first two applications. We have executed on it. We are about to, hopefully, fingers crossed, launch a product not in the not too distant future that we think is going to be revolutionary in terms of sustainability and in terms of scalability for blockchain. And then privacy, I think, is one area that is becoming more and more important, could explode in a massive way in the next 5-10 years. And then generative AI is a hot and exciting area. So we are focused on new things as opposed to old things like data center networks and compute type applications, which have many other people working on it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you more than that, but stay tuned. Keep on the lookout, and we'll surprise you.
Thank you, Rajiv. So last question from Ashish is, how do you avoid founder dilution with venture capital that can seem like venture capital at times? How can you negotiate term sheets to optimize for ownership? Are there any other sources of capital like venture debt, etc.? You have it?
Yeah, some people, are very skeptical or cautious of VCs. I'm completely the opposite. I look at VCs as partners. Now, obviously, I would say that through my experiences, I have figured out how to negotiate with VCs. But the way I look at it is that VCs really don't want to screw entrepreneurs too much. So there's a band is what I refer to it, right? So if the VCs have completely robbed you of all your equity, you don't really have an incentive to do very well in the future. And obviously, if you have if you've given them a very little share, some of the top quality VCs may not want to engage with you. So what I found is that if you find that right balance and you work with the world-class top VCs, which I've been very fortunate, what that does is it kind of sets you up for success in subsequent financing rounds, as well as in attracting employees and customers. So I would err on the side of working with top quality VCs. I would err on the side of I would get some advisors and help in helping you negotiate if you are a first-time entrepreneur. But frankly, in Silicon Valley, my experience has been very positive with every VC I have worked with.
Thank you, Rajiv. So with that, my last question, any word for the aspiring entrepreneurs, if in the audience, or any opportunities you see that they should embark on, other than obviously what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, do it early. If you don't have an idea, jump into an early stage startup, get that experience. It's an exciting time to be an entrepreneur. The world is going to change very significantly with this decentralized nature and generative AI, massive technology shifts happening. So do it. That's what I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Rajiv. Really appreciate your going over the time and from your vacation time right now. I know you're at vacation, so have a fun time. And we really appreciate this was an awesome event, and we really appreciate for your honestly sharing everything in a candid way.
Well, thank you very much, Naveen.
All those who attended, Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
And thank you to Ty.
And yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you again. See you soon.